Okay, so this week our focus will be on collecting data. All right, last week we talked about how to design good experiments. Well, we're still going to keep working with that. We're just going to add on how to collect data on top of the fact of how do you create a good, well-designed experiment. So when we're collecting the data, we need to think about a few things, right? Number one, and I think a lot of you guys did this with the helicopter lab. You just kind of informally did it, but we have to perform multiple trials, right? It's really, really important that we don't just do one or two trials because you might have done it wrong. And so the more trials that you can do, the better your results are going to look, all right? In this class, we're going to be talking about at least 5. 10 would be the best, but I know that's asking a lot to do. But I do expect that for every time we do collecting data, you're at least collecting 5 of that specific trial. Okay. We need to create an organized data table, right? A lot of times I'll create those for you, but as we move forward, I'm going to expect that you're going to be making those. But in this one, I'll give you examples of what I want you to make it look like. And then moving forward, you'll be making those as well. Okay. And then when we collect the data, we need to look at certain statistics. So in this class, all we're going to be looking for are 2 statistics, which is outliers, and we're going to be calculating the average, right? I think those are things that you've done a lot. I know the average, or in math class, I think you call it the mean, all right? But those are the things that we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to be graphing those results using Google Spreadsheets. All right, when we're performing multiple trials, we're going to get, from time to time, outliers, right? These are numbers that just don't quite make sense. As I was going around from group to group, working with the helicopter lab, some of you guys were just naturally already doing this, where you're going, wait, that doesn't sound right when we did the last trial. That's an outlier, right? These are the ones where when you're looking at your numbers, right? And here's a data table to show it. Now, my expectation is that you are taking a screenshot of this part right here, not the whole slide, but you're taking a screenshot of the data table, and you can also do the part where it says outlier. You don't need to try and figure that part out. But if you forget how to make a screenshot, it's Command-Shift-4, right? And then you can just highlight what you want to take a picture of, and then you can toss that into your notebook. But anyway, the idea is really, really simple, that if you look at that 1.6 meters, it clearly does not follow the other numbers in in all the trials. So in this case, that's an outlier. And what we usually do with an outlier is we completely get rid of it, right? And we try to do it over again, right, if time permits. Now, if something takes like 10 seconds to complete, my expectation is that you are getting rid of the outlier and you're redoing it all over again. Really, you don't the times where you don't want to redo it is if the trial takes like 10, 15 minutes and you just don't have the time to redo it. But if you have time, my expectation is that you redo the trial. Okay, so the next statistic that we're going to look at after we get rid of the outlier, okay, is we need to find the average. Now again, right, if you have an outlier and you don't have time to redo it, you need to remove the outlier, right, before you find the average, because the outlier is going to completely ruin your data, because you probably had the outlier because you did something wrong. You timed something wrong, you measured the distance wrong, you did something wrong, you didn't control that experiment very well. So we need to remove that statistic, right? Hopefully you redid it and you have that. But if you look at that same data table that we had before, right, we need to make sure that when we find the average, which is, right, adding up everything, all the numbers, and then dividing by how many trials we have, okay, you'll see that when I calculated it, I didn't include the 1.6 meters, right, because that is an outlier that I do not want as part of it. Now, here's the thing, though. You have to make sure that you include outliers in the sense that, like, you have to show it. What we don't want to do is we don't want to put it as part of our calculations, okay? So even though we remove outliers, we don't actually physically delete it and say that never happened, right? We still say it happened. We just don't include it as part of our calculations in our average. So if you look at it here, our average is 3.35 meters, right? If I would have included this 1.6, my average would actually been in the twos, right? It's a very, very big difference between having a 3.35 and maybe saying I have a 2.8 meters. So that's the reason why we don't include those. So again, right, my expectation is that if I'm referring to this, you should be screenshotting, so Command Shift 4. I should be highlighting this, and this will save onto your desktop, and you can just toss it into your notebook from here. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is once we have the averages calculated, we have all the outliers identified, we need to make a graph of our results that we have. So here is a data table that most likely you're going to have when you do your next experiment, right? What we need to do is take this and show how to take a graph. So what I want you to do, number one is, right, using screenshot, please screenshot this data table into your set of notes. And then the next thing I want you to do is to open up Google Spreadsheets. All right, so I've now opened up my Google Spreadsheet, and I can see that I have my data table in here. Now, for those of you who don't know how to who didn't know how to get a Google Spreadsheet, if you're in your Google Drive, if you just click on New here and go to Google Sheets, it'll take you to a brand new sheet that looks like this. So your screen right now looks something like this because you don't have anything on it yet, right? So eventually I'm going to have you guys put this in, but you don't need to copy all of this because I'm not going to graph all of this, right? I don't need to graph what happened in every single trial, right? My graph should really, really just tell me what's the overall achieving experiment and what happened in it. And so I don't really need to know, like, hey, on the very first trial of my drop height being 1, I received this, right, 1.1 seconds. I don't need to know that. What I do need to know is what my averages are. So when I look at this big giant table that I have, right, I want to make sure that I'm graphing what is specifically necessary to graph. So what I need to do is first, so I'm going to pull out 2 columns that I need. One is my independent variable, right? This is the height at which I drop the ball, right? So I changed on purpose that I dropped the ball from 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meters, 4 meters, and 5 meters. So I'm going to pull that, and I'm going to probably copy and paste it down here, right? This is what you're typing into your spreadsheet right now, okay? So what I'm pulling out here, please type it in. The other one is my dependent variable, right? Which is how long it took for the ball to hit the ground. So I'm going to put that over here. So in reality, all I need is these 2 columns right here to make a graph. I don't need all this stuff, right? This stuff is necessary, but it's not necessary to make a graph of, okay? So right now you need to in your spreadsheets, right, in your blank one, you need to type in all this information, okay, that I just made. So take it, if you need to pause it here to do that, go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. So hopefully now you've typed it in, right? You pause it. Now you're pressing play again. We now need to make a graph of this. Okay. So the way we're going to do that is really, really simple, right? And hopefully that you've done this before, but if not, it's okay. I'm going to teach you like you've never done it before. So the first thing I need to do is I need to tell the computer or Google Spreadsheets what I want to graph, right? So let's say that I have this screen. And I have all this, right? I don't want to graph all this, right? Well, I'm only going to highlight what I want the computer to graph. So I'm going to highlight this, okay? Then I'm going to go to Insert. And there should be something. Oops, wait. Oh, here, Chart. Sorry, I couldn't find it. Insert, Chart. I was looking for Graph, but it's Chart, okay? So now I'm going to get something that looks like this. It pops up, and most likely it's going to give me a bunch of dots, right? Ultimately, this is not the graph that I want. So what I'm going to go here is you're going to see where it says Setup and Customize. The Setup just tells me what kind of graph do I want, Okay, so in this case, it says it's a scatter chart. I don't want a scatter chart, right? What I'm looking for is a trend. Is there a trend in my data, right? So the best thing for a trend is a line graph. So I'm going to choose the one that says line, and it's going to look like this. All right. So my dots now disappeared, which is something that I want. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Okay. So this is what I have so far. So from here, I'm going to now edit it because there's a few things that I want to change to it. So in order to change my graph the way I want it to look, I'm going to click on where it says customize over here to the right. Okay. Now from here, it gives you a whole boatload of stuff of what you can change on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on where it says charts and axis titles, right? And again, you're more than welcome to click on any one of these and change things up to customize it the way you want it. I'm just going to give you the basics of what I want you to have, right? So the first thing is the chart title, okay? So that's what goes up right here. I want to change that because it just says average versus drop height, which is fine, but it's average. I want to include average time, and for some strange reason, this went on to a second row, and I don't want that, right? So I'm going to delete that so it looks like that. So whatever you make it look like right here, you'll see that in real time, it'll change it over here, okay? So that's what I want. I want it to say average time in seconds versus drop height in meters, okay? So now the next thing is I want to change the way it says this. It just says average. It doesn't say average time. So I want to change that. So I'm going to come over here, and the down arrow right next to chart title, I'm going to click on where it says vertical axis title because this is vertical, right? So now it says average. I'm going to put time and then in seconds, right? I always want to have the units on there. So now again, in real time, whatever I type here, it's going to show up right over here, okay? Now, my x-axis right here, my horizontal, that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to go with that. Okay, so now I'm done with my chart titles and axis, right? So I'm going to close out of that, and I'm going to click on series next. All right. So before I had those nice dots in there, and now they're missing, and I want those back, right? Because those are my points. So if you look at it where it says point size, right now it says none. So I'm going to change that, right? And I'm going to choose 10 because I like it a little bit bigger than normal. But you're more than welcome to choose 2, right? But that's really, really tiny, or even 7. I think that's still tiny, but I think 14 is too big. So I like 10. All right, you choose. This is where now you can choose what kind of line you have. I like the regular line. I can also do line thickness, right? And so on and so forth. I like 2, so I'm going to have it at that thickness. And then you can also change the point shape. I like circles, so I'm going to keep it at that. And that's it. All right, I want connect the dots to show, because now I can see my trend of what's happening as the ball gets dropped from a certain height, okay? And now I'm going to close out on that one, right? Now there are other ones that you can click on to get a little bit more, like if I wanted a max and a min and stuff like that. For example, right here, I like actually where my graph starts at 0, 0. So where it says minimum value for my horizontal axis, I might put a 0 there. That way, it's starting off at 0, or it's like this. You don't have to do that. I personally like doing that because I like to see everything from 0 on. So I'm going to do that. All right, I'm going to keep that as I'm going through it. Sorry, it must have gone off. All right, you can click on other things. There's other things like this that you can click on, but I'm not really going to get into that part. But now I've made my graph, right? So this is the graph that I like, and I'm going to keep as it is. So now I'm ready to include this into my my notes, right? So I'm going to close out of this. Now, there's 2 things that I want you to move over towards your notes, right? Number 1 is this right here, right? This data table. So if I just copy and paste that and put that in my notes, right? Now you're going to notice that it looks like this, and I don't like that, right? So instead of copy and pasting my notes like that, what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to take a screenshot of it. So I'm going to take a screenshot of that. It's on my desktop now, and I'm going to put that in, okay, to my notes. So I'm going to go back to my notes and put that in. I'm going to go insert image, upload from my computer, right? It's called a screenshot. Oops. Oh, where's the screenshot? Oh, there it is. Okay. So I put that in there, right? And then below that, I'm going to put in my, right, my graph. So now I'm going to take this. Now, how do I put a graph in there? Well, if you click on the three little dots right here, you'll see where it says copy chart. Click on that, okay? And then it's copied now. Now I can go back in here, and now I can paste it. A quick way to paste it is just Command V, right? Or you can go insert and paste. Now it says, do you want to link this spreadsheet? I don't really care to link it, so I always say paste unlinked. It doesn't really matter. It just means that if I were to click on this, if I were to click on the graph, it would take me to the spreadsheet right away. I don't really need to do that. And there you go, and I paste it, and now I have my graph in there. Okay, and I can resize it to fit the way I want to. But that's the graph that I want to include in there, and that's how I include that into my notes. So please make sure that that graph that you just made goes into your notes. So the last thing that we're going to do for our notes is we're going to set up for our next lab that we're doing in a couple days. All right, and that lab is going to be obviously taking what we learned last week with designing good experiments and controlled experiments, and adding that also with collecting data. So we're going to be performing multiple trials. We're going to be looking for outliers. We're going to be calculating average, and we're going to be graphing all this information. Okay. What I want you to do just for today, all right, is what I want is for you to get the materials needed for that. So take some time right now and get a couple things. Number one, get your binder. This is going to include as a ramp. If you don't want to use your binder, you can get anything else that you think you can use as a ramp. Okay. But a binder works really, really well for this. Two, you need something that rolls. So a tennis ball, lacrosse ball, a battery works pretty well, a marble, something obviously like that just can roll. And you want a flat space that you can do this, which is about 150 centimeters or 5 feet long, that you can kind of like place the ramp and roll it along. What I want you to do is, with our lab, it's going to be how does the steepness of a ramp affect the ball speeds, right? So as we make the ramp steeper and steeper, what happens to that speed of the ball, right? I think it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. What we want to just make sure is we can collect that data accurately, right, as we're going through that. And again, we're working on setting up good experiments. So what I want you to do is get all that stuff. I want you to set it up, right? Take a picture of it and insert it into your notes. So that way when you come in on the next day to do our lab, you're ready to go and you're ready to actually start collecting data immediately. Okay? So that way we can finish that lab in one class period. So that is your job. All right? Take whatever long it takes to do, 10, 15 minutes to complete this part, and then make sure you're putting those in there into your notes. Remember, making sure that it's a well-designed experiment. So make sure that you understand all the controlled variables that have to go into this when you're working on it. Okay. Once you do that, you're finished with the set of notes.